Russia, no matter how the war ends, he thinks Russia will be desperate to seek retribution, to carry out some sort of revenge on all those nations that have helped Ukraine.
Yes.
And he thinks that that's what we've got to be we've got to be worried about, and we've therefore got to prepare for an eventuality which could see Russia waging war against the West with the help of countries like Iran, North Korea, and China.
Tell me about your latest piece.
Well, the latest piece is about some comments from General Sir Roly Walker. He's the new head of the army. He started the position just a few weeks ago, and he was making a speech at the Royal United Services Institute yesterday about the current state of the army and the threats that we could face in the future. And one of the things that we're going to be pointing out later on at 6 o'clock is his remarks on Ukraine, because quite interestingly, he was saying that it would take Russia a total of, at least sort of 5 years to be able to capture swathes of Ukrainian territory. And he warned that it would actually cost the Russians another 1.5 more than 1 million deaths or people being wounded. And so that was quite a huge warning. And he also talked about the threats from other countries aside from Russia.
It's just worth dwelling for a moment before we look at what Sir Roly maybe wants us to take away from all of that. Just that sort of figure, 1.5 million losses for Russia in this war. If it goes on at this rate, it takes your breath away, Larisa.
It's a staggering amount. So 500,000 people at least have either been killed or wounded so far. These are Russian people. And so he's obviously saying that figure is going to get much higher. And actually, Russia isn't even going to gain that much. They've already got they've partially managed to take some territory inside 4 of Ukraine's oblasts. And he's saying that it will take them another 5 years before they're able to take all of that territory. And that's if the sort of situation stays the same. It grinds on slowly. It's slow, Russia's military machine slowly takes more territory. But of course, if something instrumental changes, like the support for Ukraine changes in some huge way, then of course, then they might not be able to do that, obviously.
And is that the political subtext? I mean, it's not the general's job to send political messages, but clearly, I guess there must be a political message there to his political masters and to the masters of Ukraine's allies across Europe and NATO. Just interpret it for us.
Yeah, well, we had actually, very interestingly, we had a briefing with him just before this speech happened, and I've never really been quite so taken aback in a briefing with a military chief before, because what he was saying was actually pretty terrifying. And he was saying that he fears that Russia, no matter how the war ends, he thinks Russia will be desperate to seek retribution, to carry out some sort of revenge on all those nations that have helped Ukraine.
Yes.
And he thinks that that's what we've got to be worried about, and we've therefore got to prepare for an eventuality which could see Russia waging war against the West with the help of countries like Iran, North Korea, and China. And so obviously the ultimate probably message from him is that he needs to be able to get on with the job. He needs to transform the army. He can't be seeing cuts to the size of the army or cuts to his equipment program, as he's already outlined in the next few years. And so the Labour government has got to, give him the resources that he needs and not take anything away as part of this major defence review that they're doing at the moment.
Right, so that's a clear political message to the new Labour government, and obviously they're free to pass that on to allies in Europe and NATO. Just build up these defences because he thinks we're going to need them maybe sooner than a lot of people imagine, and that's a huge challenge to put that kind of resources, that kind of funding into military spending. And what about the war in Ukraine? There's a more immediate point there, isn't there? Because this sort of level of attrition for Russia over 5 years, 1.5 million losses, as you say, that depends on if it goes on as it is. But there are big questions about whether it can go on as it is. There's an election in America, which could be crucial to that. And then you get to the way that European allies, say, are prepared to give their support, the use of missiles and how those missiles can be used and fired, for example, into Russian territory. Again, there are messages there, Larissa, aren't there?
Yeah, there's an awful lot that could happen in the next few years. And excuse me, one of the things that what Ukraine wants is it wants to be able to use the weapons that countries like Britain have gifted it and hit targets inside Russia. It wants to be able to hit Russian airfields where which they're using to obviously put aircraft and where the aircraft are flying from. And it wants to destroy them. And without approval from the West, it can't do that. So actually, a lot of nations are currently discussing whether they should allow Ukraine to hit those targets inside Russia. Britain is pressing other nations to give it the green light to let Ukraine do that. But so far, Ukraine isn't able to use weapons like Storm Shadow, these cruise missiles that can hit targets more than 150 miles away and use them against Russian targets inside Russian territory.
Just briefly explain that to me, because I thought this new Labour government, Keir Starmer's administration, had said Russia was free to use its missiles supplied by the United Kingdom in the way that it thought fit. And Joe Biden, the American president, has signaled much the same sort of thing, a limited use of weaponry into Russian territory. But is that not as simple as that?
It's so confusing, this policy. Even President Zelensky himself was confused. So Keir Starmer did say that Ukraine could do as it pleased with the British weapons that it was being gifted. And then it turned out that actually, no, the British still haven't given the green light for Ukraine to use those weapons inside Russia. They're awaiting approval from two NATO allies, one of which is France, the other one is another close ally that I've been asked not to mention. And they're waiting for approval from those. It's a really muddled picture because it's not quite clear if they also need approval from another country. But so far, they are not, Ukraine cannot do this. In terms of the American policy, it's very sort of specific policy. They can use weapons inside Russian territory in the defense of one of the key cities, but it has to be in that sort of limited range.
Right. So that's because the British longer range missiles are built by a combination of countries, and you need a yes from all of those partners before you can use them in that way. Is that the essence of it?
It's a partnership with the French, so that's why you need French approval. Okay. Not quite clear about why you need approval from the others.
Yeah. Okay. Now Germany, of course, they're under pressure to allow and supply longer range missiles too. We're talking about, are they Taurus missiles? I'm no expert in this, but they're reluctant to do that because they don't want to see escalation.
Yeah, Taurus is very similar to the Storm Shadow in terms of its range. But yes, the Ukrainians really want Taurus as well because the Germans have got a lot of them. The Germans don't want to send them because they're really terrified about escalation. And that's what generally NATO allies fear. Of course, it isn't going to look good necessarily. Well, it isn't going to look good, of course, if the Ukrainians use Western weapons, for example, Storm Shadow, and then they hit civilians by accident. And then you've got the images of, British weapons hitting civilians inside Russia. It could really inflame tensions. Of course, the Ukrainians have been really clear about what they need those weapons for. They want to hit military targets in line with international law. And they believe that they need to be able to hit targets inside Russia in order to change, the direction of the war.
Okay, now last question then. How far are we away from the situation that the new army commander would like to see? It'll be up to those Britain's partners when it comes to the use of those British weapons. It's up to the American voter what happens when it comes to America's support for Ukraine. But when it comes to the threat from Russia, does Sir Roly think we're anywhere near being able to fight such a war, or are we just simply, as it were, naked and vulnerable as things stand?
I think he thinks that as it currently stands, with the army's in a pretty dismal state, and there needs to be a lot of modernization. But I think he believes that he can do that quickly, and he thinks that he can double the lethality of the force in 3 years, which means that he thinks that with everything that he's got at the moment, he can actually transform the army so it could kill more people on the battlefield than it can currently by using more precision weapons and things that he describes as smart weapons. So I think he thinks that he can do things quickly, but as it stands, Britain is feeling quite vulnerable, I think.